Hello, and thank you for listening to Conquering Chaos and Mayhem. I'm your moderator, Brett Glover, and it's my pleasure to introduce the host of Conquering Chaos and Mayhem, Darryl Culley. Darryl, you enjoying your summer so far?
Hey, Brett, it has been awesome.
Yeah,
and
it
yours?
Has been nice and warm. Well, it's been warm, but it's been a little bit smoky. So I guess it's kind of interesting that we're going to be speaking to a great guest lined up today, Darryl, with experience in safety consultancy, instruction, volunteer response. Let's welcome Arctic Fire Safety Services Limited President, Kris Liivam. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, pleasure to have you. Darryl, I know you got a long list of questions to be picking Kris's brain at, so I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the conversation.
Hey, welcome, Kris. First of all, it was great to meet you at the NFPA conference in Las Vegas. That is such a great event. Thousands of people from around the world. I believe it was 4,000 or 5,000 people at that event. And we just happened to run into each other. Fellow Canadians.
Yes, bonding over $10 coffee.
Yes, which they added dollar tip to. But welcome. So you run a private fire department specializing in wildfires. And can you tell me a little bit about the service that you provide and I was impressed with the size of your organization.
Sure. So we specifically deal with the wildland urban interface fire. So that's when you've got the raging fire heading towards the community. My crew and I stand between that fire and the structures to help defend it as best we can. A lot of people get really fixated on the big wall of fire that comes towards the community, but it's really the firebrands that destroy most of the homes. So if you look at what happened with Fort McMurray, and a few of these other communities, the studies have shown that 95% of these fires have been destroyed not by the big wall of fire, but by the embers flying into your gutters, if there's leaves, into your patio furniture, into your firewood, into your tall grass, your potted plants. So with that in mind, we find that these homes are very, for the most part, salvageable, able to be saved. I mean, it's just a matter of having a few trained people that are able to stand there to do our best to mitigate the fuel load.
You showed me pictures of everything from brush trucks to pumpers and tankers to even an ARF truck.
I've got 8 fire trucks, including the ARF truck, and I've got a crew of about 40 firefighters that work with me. It's still a pretty sizable complement. It's bigger than quite a few municipal volunteer fire services. No, in Alberta, though, there is a huge private firefighting complex where there's, I'd say, about 15 different companies and over 2,000 private firefighters that could be drawn upon to help with these disaster situations.
So it's a resource that the province has available to them and communities have available to them to give you a call and say, help, right? We've got this wildfire bearing down on our area. We need some assistance. This year you were very busy, particularly early in the year, as the country basically was involved in multiple major fires from coast to coast back in June primarily. Can you tell us a little bit about where you were assigned and what your teams were doing?
Sure. So we were called up on May 4th to start off with the Drayton Valley fire. So we got the call at 11:30 at night. And so mobilizing our crews at that time to make our way out there. Then halfway through that fire, the province said, hey, we need to shift some of these resources around because everything was called to Drayton Valley first, just because they're the first ones to call for help. But then we got our crews sent up to Wildwood out near Yellowhead County. We had our crews go up to Grand Prairie County, and we were out there for a few days. Then we had a few of our crews sent to Northern Lights County, which is near Peace River. Then we eventually got sent out to Peavine Métis Settlement, that's where I had 5 of my trucks out there with about 20 firefighters, and I also took on the role of Plans Section Chief and Logistics Section Chief. Then after that, had a bit about a week of respite, then sent our crews out to Yellowhead County again when that fire flared back up.
The benefit of having private organization on standby, ready to go, apparatus, firefighters, well-equipped, well-trained, is that the province can call on you at any time, and you're there to supplement their resources.
Exactly. We see ourselves as a capacity boost. We're not there to overtake anyone. We're there just to help out where we can. Most of my firefighters belong to volunteer fire halls at other places, or they've used to be volunteer firefighters, but they got burnt out from the workload, which I think we can all appreciate. But they still have that taste for fire, so they still want to come in for a couple weeks at a time and kind of get that adrenaline rush, get that fix that we all seem to need. But they go out there because they want to do it, and we're willing to put up with worst case scenario. So no power, no gas, no heated showers, sleeping on cots or on mattresses in gymnasiums, eating food prepared 3 hours in advance from the Salvation Army, like pretty much just about military rations. And I can say this from experience being in Afghanistan for a little bit for a military contractor. So no, our guys are willing to put up with a lot because we really have that dedication to help do our best to protect communities. And that's why I got into this years ago, because I felt there's more that could be done, especially from the private sector, to help protect communities, rather than every year the government saying, hey, we've done our best, but that's that. I think there's more that can be done. So I put my money where my mouth was and stepped up.
Here you are, you're a backup resource. We hear in the news, firefighters coming in from around the world. And let's face it, although we talk about them coming in from Australia and South Africa and Europe, they're coming in at great cost, right? It's our taxpayer dollars are paying a premium to have these firefighters come in, and you're right there and available, ready to go.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, to be honest with you, because I've tried for many years to break into that national realm. So I'm very thankful that the province of Alberta has recognized how important these contractors are to helping their supplement the resources, because a lot of us are NFPA trained. However, the CIFC partnership does not see the value in engaging contractors at the national level, which is really unfortunate, because you have a group of experienced firefighters that could be an all hazard force similar to a CAL FIRE department, but they don't want us to have that type 1 wildfire or type 2 IA firefighter credential, so that we're able to be interprovincial or even international in response. So you take this 2,000 person workforce of dedicated trained firefighters, you put them through this 10-day course. In Canada or in the United States, they've actually abbreviated that for 1001 firefighters to a 4-day crossover course. And now you take this resource and you make that nationwide. Canada's got this civil emergency response service available now. It's just a matter of how do we work out the logistics? How do we work out getting this firefighting force from Alberta to be able to go to Quebec, or being able to go to the Maritimes, being able to go to BC, being able to go to, say, Australia in our wintertime, or down to Brazil, or anything like that. And that's the challenge that's currently in place. And we need to figure out how to get these roadblocks out of the way, so that we could get the people who want to go fight fire out there fighting fire, and use the talent that we already have in the country, rather than bringing in people from around the world.
And the private sector can do it efficiently and effectively. And like you said, you're only get paid for when you get called out. So it's, there's a lot of cost savings in having a resource like this available.
Well, I definitely think so. It's also a challenge too, at the same time, being an on-demand resource like that, because without having that retainer or capacity in place, capacity charges in place, it does make retaining people a little bit more of a challenge. Whereas if you look at how Canada manages our winters with snowplows, most of our snowplows operators are contractors. They're manpower is paid a retainer to stay on for the season rather than disappearing to go drive long haul trucks rather than out there pushing snow. The trucks, the snow plows are kept on a retainer. So this way the maintenance is maintained. The insurance is kept up. The contractor keeps a few dollars in there for administrative fees, but they make their money when they're actually out there on the road pushing snow. And the last time I checked, we have a summer every year and we have wildfires every summer. So why can't we do something similar in Canada? Take these contractors, the 1001 firefighters, put them through that 4-day crossover course, put them on a retainer. It could be a standby fee or whatever it is, but make them so that when you have a situation where typically I get called at about 11 o'clock, 11:30 at night. And, it's really handy having people that could be able to get their duffel bag, get on the road within half an hour, get to the shop, get in the trucks, and have a 3-hour response time. Whereas you look at the Canadian forces, for them to deploy 200 men, it takes them a week, where I'm able to deploy 20 people in 3 hours. And if I was larger, I am sure I could get 200 people deployed in the same amount of time frame. So it's just a matter of connecting these pieces together to be that resource that could be drawn upon.
You've been deployed multiple locations this year. We know that with climate change, we're only looking at growing fire seasons, starting earlier, running later, and being more intense. This sector, this private sector, provides the province of Alberta, certainly, with this flexibility. So is it the province that contracts you directly, or is it the municipalities being supplemented or financed through the province?
So it's a little unique. So with the case of Drayton Valley, we were called directly by Drayton Valley's Incident Command to deploy. But when we were sent up to Grand Prairie, we were sent through the Alberta Emergency Management Agency through their, I think they call it PEC now, Provincial Emergency Center. Then same with the rest of our deployments, were all through the PEC, except for our second deployment with Yellowhead County, we were called directly through them. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And my understanding for this recent funding announcement through the Alberta government that 90% of the costs were being picked up by the province and the 10% were being picked up by the local community, with the exception of the Peavine Métis settlement, because they came into an agreement early on with Alberta Emergency Management that the province was going to take care of our invoice right away. So because they were a small community, they didn't have the same funds as a very rich oil and gas tax base. So the arrangement was already made ahead of time to deliver the service and to make sure that I was taken care of, which is a great release, but also that the community was being taken care of, because I wasn't the only contractor out there. There was 2 other contract fire departments out there, as well as a number of municipal fire departments that were out there too.
Right. So one of the challenge is when you take a municipal fire department and send them into interface fire, is that you've just taken them out of their own community for the emergencies that are ongoing and still continue directly in their community. So you're stretching your resources even thinner by counting on these municipal services to fill in areas that are really a provincial responsibility. So what is it going to take for other provinces, whether that's BC or Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario? What's it going to take for them to be able to look and say, hey, this is a resource that we should be considering?
I think it's just acceptance that the private sector could help. I mean, you look at Fort McMurray, for example, or even Fort Chipewyan this year, where the military do logistics, but we've only got so many jets and helicopters with them that are available. So WestJet and Air Canada were used for airlifts. You look at the Salvation Army, where they're coming in and they're providing meals to different residents that are evacuated. We just need to be seen as another tool in the toolbox, not something that's kept at the bottom of the drawer, but something a little bit closer to the top. And just going back to your earlier comment there about depleting resources for a community, I want to reflect on what happened in BC back in 2017 with the Williams Lake fire complex that was happening. There was one community that I won't mention specifically, but they sent a brush truck to Williams Lake along with their A team and left behind the B team and C team to manage the community. This was when they had a extreme fire hazard of their own, plus there's a known arsonist in the area. So sure enough, a fire happened. It just consumed 30 homes, caused 300 other residents to be 300 residences to be evacuated for weeks on end. Not to say this one crew would have saved all those homes, but I'm sure there would have been one or two more saves, and I'm sure those families would have appreciated it, especially since it's their tax dollars that paid for that brush truck, to pay for the training for that fire team, for those firefighters to be there to protect their local community. And what's happened in BC, and I know this because I was told directly, it's become a major fundraising for those fire departments. So they see this as a revenue source. So now you've got a public entity that's acting as a private for-profit business. And that's changing their alignment for what their priorities are. They're no longer resourcing for their own community's needs. They're resourcing for what can happen somewhere else. Right? You take a community that in Alberta that doesn't have trees in southern Alberta, but they're buying a sprinkler trailer. That's $200,000 that they're gambling that's going to be called up to be making money for them in the next year or two. But that $200,000 could go towards a brush truck that could help deal with these raging grass fires that grow exponentially down there, or it could be used for new SCBAs, better radios, something that really means more to the local community than a sprinkler trailer when there's no trees. So those are the kind of things that we need to start seeing some realizations on here, that we can't be multitasking fire departments to be doing provincial response when they need to be taking care of their home communities. Let's develop, if we're not going to have a provincial agency that's able to be an all hazards force, because right now I haven't seen any interest from any of the provincial agencies to create an all hazards firefighting force. BC is going to year-round wildland firefighting, but that's the closest we're seeing. But they're not training their wildland firefighters to be 1001 firefighters. They're just still putting through the 10-day course, but they're now just keeping them on throughout the winter as well. But they're not saying, okay, you guys could now go deal with a car fire, or you guys could now go deal with a structure fire. They're not doing that. They're still strictly wildland, whereas you take a contractor who's got 1001 firefighters, put them through the wildland interface supplemental training, and make them that backbone of the province. Make it a 200-man, 300-man force, something that's sizable, able to do a couple communities, being able to provide that supplemental resource to the local community. So this way the other towns are not depleting their own resources, because the whole concept of mutual aid, in my mind, was meant for if you have a warehouse fire or if you have a big barn fire or something like that, where it's going to take more than one or two towns to put out that fire. You're looking for a lot of resources to come in there, but it's only for a few hours. You're not expecting volunteer firefighters to go away for weeks or months on end to go fight fire in another part of the province. I mean, they've got their own employers. They've got their own lives. They didn't sign on for this type of deployment, whereas with this contractor workforce that's already accustomed to working for weeks on end in camps, because that's how oil and gas works in Alberta. They already live out of a duffel bag. They're already used to working away from home like this. That's how they make their income. So why not utilize people that already have this mindset, who already have this ability, who are not going to be breaking up their marriages because they're gone for weeks on end. They're not having a disruptive family life. They're not interrupting their own employers for being gone like this. They're able to provide the service that's required, and they have the training that's needed, and they're able to work safely. It's just a matter of utilizing this resource effectively and growing it to a point of where it can become a sustainable capacity that can be used throughout the summers in Canada, but also in the wintertime internationally.
As we saw this year, with fires erupting simultaneously across the country, it takes time to, and time and a lot of money to bring in these additional resources, whether they're from, Mexico or Australia, South Africa, Portugal, Spain, and then they get called back. We saw Ontario sending a lot of firefighters out to Alberta and then calling them back because we had our own fires to deal with. Where if you got this resource, it certainly got a lot of potential to grow and make our systems more effective, more responsible tax-wise as well.
Well, I think so, because contractors, by definition, tend to be lean and mean. We're not going to. My concern with this talk of creating a new wildland firefighting task force for Canada, that's a public service, is it tends to get very top heavy very quickly, and they start dealing with supplemental areas that are not really the core mission. So if you could take trained firefighters, and let's face it, most of these guys actually pay for their own 1001 ticket because they want to become municipal firefighters. So this gives them a chance to use that skill set right away. So they get out of fire school, they're eager, they want to learn, they've got the strong backs, and they still want to develop their skill sets. So let's get these people a shovel in their hand. Let's get them out there helping to fight the fires, build up these skill sets. So this way, after 2 or 3 years of this, they've built up that mental maturity, and they've got that experience behind them with the big fires, so that when they do apply for Calgary or Ottawa or Montreal or Halifax fire departments, they've already got that big fire experience. They understand the ICS. They understand how to deal with the worst case scenarios, because they've now been through a few of these events where everyone's gone, the stress is there, everyone is doing the best they can to respond to the incident, but it builds that maturity that you may not necessarily get if you're dealing with maybe 2 or 3 fires a month and the rest of your calls are medical calls. This builds up that real mental fortitude, I think.
Yeah, so there's many, many benefits to a private sector component as, like you said, just another tool. It's a tool that can be utilized, and in the same way that these fire departments are renting apparatus or renting heavy equipment to respond to these calls, they're just renting firefighting service.
Exactly. Because a really good example is the Crete back in 2017, where even after the community was reintroduced back home after the evacuations were lifted, the contract fire departments were still kept on, along with the Crete being back in service. So the Crete firefighters dealt with any structure calls or MVIs, and the contractors were there to maintain the wildfire risk that were still present. So it gave these members a chance to let their hair down a bit, knowing that they don't have to go out to every hotspot call because there's someone who's already able to go out there and deal with it for them. So this way, well, I mean, when you're a volunteer firefighter, you're giving up a lot of your time already, but you don't want to be giving up every 4 hours to go deal with a hotspot that keeps flaring up every time. Let's have a contractor go there and deal with that heat bog and just keep it contained, rather than dedicating resources to it for weeks or even months on end.
Well, thank you, Kris. It was great to have the opportunity to meet you down at the NFPA. And as soon as I met you, I thought at the time we were in the middle of the peak wildfire season, and I thought this would be a great podcast to have. So thank you for joining us. And let's hope that there's some decision makers that are listening in onto our podcast that say, hey, there is another option out there. Let's take a look at it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm more than willing to talk with any agency, and particularly First Nations communities, because sometimes they do get left behind in the call outs. I'm more than willing to work with them to help protect their communities as well.
We really appreciate you coming on today, sharing with us. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us on Conquering Chaos and Mayhem. On behalf of our host, Darryl Culley, I'm Breck Glover. Thanks for listening.